Entelodont. Up first on today's countdown, we've got one of the scariest ancient animals ever discovered that somehow has evolved into one of modern day's best breakfast meats. Well, sort of. I'm talking about the entelodont, or what's also known in some circles as the killer pig. These massive beasts roamed the earth about 50 million years ago, and despite their terrifying name, actually are more closely related to hippos and whales than they are modern-day pigs. Through studies of ancient fossils, these animals likely began their history in Mongolia, but eventually spread all across Europe, Asia, and even North America. It's believed that they ultimately became extinct somewhere between 16 and 19 million years ago. Of course, right now, I expect for most of you to be wondering one thing. Exactly how big did these hell pigs grow to be? Well, what's kind of crazy is that the smaller entelodonts would have weighed nearly 350 pounds, so it wasn't uncommon to have the larger ones reach over 5, 6, or even 700 pounds in weight. Another cool yet scary fact about these hefty fellas is that they had extremely large heads, especially for their overall size. There's one version of them, the Dinosaurus, whose head could easily exceed more than 40% of its overall body. Can you imagine running into an animal that was likely just minding its own business because it's suspected that they were omnivores, but whose head was nearly half the size of its overall body? Yeah, neither can I. But still, some researchers suggest that because of their front teeth, which were sharp and perfect for ripping flesh from bones, that these huge creatures could have also enjoyed their fair share of meat as well. Either way it goes, I for one remain pretty stoked that these gigantic, potentially killer pigs are a thing of the past. Number 9. Meganeuropsis. One group of living things that I think is safe to say nearly every single human on planet Earth could do without are bugs. There are, at the last count, nearly 900,000 different insects crawling and flying around, and these days most of them are a whole lot smaller than they used to be. And even though they're mostly a mere few inches long today, several million years ago, the largest insect in the world was the Meganeura, or what's otherwise known as the giant dragonfly. Roughly 300 million years ago, these primitive insects that were actually more like griffin flies than dragonflies existed. They were predators, and fossil records indicated that the insects would have grown to around 18.5 inches long, with a wingspan of almost 2.5 feet. So the first question that typically comes to mind when people hear of insects growing to these incredible sizes during those ancient times is how? How could bugs grow to be so big back then? Yet today, most of them can fit squarely within the palm of your hand. Well, the most common answer is that there was a far higher oxygen count in the air, which allowed many of the invertebrates living on land to grow and reach incredibly massive sizes. The only thing I don't know is if that's cool or is that just scary. Number 8. Extreme croc. There's a theme that will attach itself to a fair number of the animals on today's list, and we'll check in with you in a few minutes to see if you've picked up on it. And while you think about that, up next we've got another supersized creature that has a modern-day cousin that we all feel is more suitable for life among human beings, and that is the Deinosuchus, or what's otherwise known as the mega crocodile. You don't often hear about animals that were big or bad enough to tangle with the infamous Tyrannosaurus Rex. However, this was certainly one of those. The word Deinosuchus technically means terrible crocodile, and as far as fossil records indicate, this animal could have certainly lived up to that hype. These big boys grew to be nearly 50 feet long, and multiple fossils have been found deep beneath the earth in North America. It's assumed that they roamed Earth around 80 million years ago and had 6-inch long, super sharp teeth that would have been capable of tearing down even the largest foes. Number 7. Arthropleura. So if the Meganeuropsis is the largest flying insect of all time, and it is, then what would be the largest land-dwelling, non-flying bug of all time? Well, hey, for starters, I'm glad you asked. And to answer your question, well, that's easy. The Arthropleura, or what also could be described as the megamillipede. Now, I know I'm not alone in this, but millipedes and centipedes with all those legs are some of the creepiest things to look at. But can you imagine if you saw a millipede that was over 1.5 feet wide and nearly 6 feet long? Yeah, neither can I, and luckily we don't have to because it's 2020. But sometime around 300 million years ago, it's expected that these bugs not only existed, but played a vital part in ruling the lands of North America and even parts of Europe. These giant renditions of modern-day insects, much like the supersized dragonflies from just a few minutes ago, are assumed to have roamed near and within the ancient swamps of their time. The flattened body of these huge millipedes were comprised of over 30 different segments, with each segment having as many as 8 legs attached. Their bodies would have also been covered in thick, tough plates that would have made them a tough snack to munch on, if indeed it was ever attacked by something bigger than it was. Despite everything we know, archaeologists have still yet to find an Arthropleura completely intact. Everything that we see today are just artist renditions of what they could have looked like. But with new discoveries being uncovered daily, it likely won't be long before they do. Number 6. Saber-toothed cat. For most families today, there are essentially 2 main types of house pets, dogs and cats. And just like everything else, modern-day breeds of these animals are far smaller and a lot less dangerous than their ancient cousins. Up next, we'll talk about the saber-toothed cat, which sounds just as scary as anything else on today's countdown. Now, as a kid, I've got to admit that the saber-toothed tiger was one of my favorite prehistoric creatures. I mean, it just looked cooler than a lot of the other things we learned about. And there's a piece of me that wishes a quick trip to the local zoo could satisfy my desire to know exactly how they looked. These animals would have gone extinct at the end of the Ice Age roughly 10,000 years ago and were known for their distinctive pair of super long and super sharp canine teeth that hung out from their mouths. Also found on North and South America, it's believed that climate change wiped out their food supply, thus leading them to their certain yet unexpected extinction. This animal, while it was alive, was the apex predator wherever it lived, and it's believed that they spent a majority of their lives in the woodlands and grasslands. It's also believed that these animals may have lived in family units, like lion prides, and hunted together in packs, which only intensifies the scariness factor when you consider that back then, if you saw one of these ferocious cats, well, there was likely a few more not too far away. Number 5. Tyrannosaurus Rex. And because no list discussing extinct animals would be complete without perhaps the most popular of all extinct animals, up next we've got the legendary Tyrannosaurus Rex, or T-Rex for short. Now, if you've ever seen a Jurassic Park movie, any of the 19 of them to have ever come out, well, I'm just kidding, I think there's only like 5, then you probably have a good idea of what these big fellas were all about. But for those who don't know, the word Tyrannosaurus stems from the Greek word meaning tyrant lizard, and for as large as these things grew to be, which was about 43 feet and over 7 tons, although their arms were super small, that word fits perfectly. The truly frightening thing about this animal, however, was its massive head and thus massive jaws. There is some debate as to whether or not this creature was a predator or a scavenger, because some say that it was fast enough on 2 legs to hunt its own prey, while others contend that it would have moved far too slow to actually hunt, and thus just scared off smaller predators who had done all the legwork of the kill, and then just stole its dinner on a daily basis. Number 4. Spinosaurus. Now that we've gotten that pesky T-Rex out the way, let's get to another dinosaur that a lot of people actually have never heard of, the Spinosaurus. And it's a bit shocking to me, honestly, that we don't hear more about this old dinosaur because it is the biggest carnivorous dino of all time, making it even larger and scarier than the Tyrannosaurus Rex. These husky fellows would have roamed the swampy areas of North America roughly 100 million years ago, and their name, Spinosaurus, means spine lizard, which is appropriate especially when you consider their appearance. The distinctive spines that grew on the animal's back reached lengths of 7 feet and were eerily covered and connected with a separate skin. And while they were bigger than the T-Rex, they also had another ability that not many other dinosaurs had at the time, which was the ability to swim. It's believed that they likely spent a majority of their lives in the water, at least according to a report released back in 2014. Number 3. Mega Piranha. So, have you figured out the theme yet? No? Well, you're running out of time. Anyway, up next, we've got another ancient animal that you should be ecstatic isn't around anymore. And for the first time today, we'll focus on something that definitely spent its entire life underwater. And of course, we're talking about the Mega Piranha. Scientists believe that this underwater creature would have had a bite with a stronger force than alligators, sharks, and even the mighty T-Rex. A fish that could have measured as long as 4.5 feet long, the Mega Piranha lived roughly 10 million years ago. An interesting note about the teeth of these ancient animals. The Mega Piranha's teeth were formed uniquely enough to allow them to slice through the flesh of any living animal, but also sturdy enough to chomp down and crush through the shells of turtles and pierce armor-plated catfish that would have also been swimming in the oceans at the same time. Number 2. Terror birds. We'll move right along. We're up next. We've got evidence of another ancient animal that we all should be glad is extinct. And this time around, it's something that we really don't have a modern-day cousin to reference. They're called the terror birds, and these murderous bunch couldn't fly, but they most definitely had the ability to kill. Standing at roughly 10 feet tall, these wingless birds had beaks that were similar to the structure of a pickaxe. There are over 15 known species of these animals, with the tallest one standing at an incredible height. They roamed mostly in South America somewhere around 10 million years ago, and they lived in the forests and are believed to be the apex predator nearly anywhere that they went. And some experts suggest that these animals would have had the capability to run near speeds of 30 miles per hour. Number 1. Megalania. We'll close out today's show with one more incredibly sized lizard, known in the science world simply as the Megalania. These husky fellows roamed in the plains of Australia and could have measured up to 25 feet long. They ate meat, had powerful legs and jaws, and are essentially the mega-sized version of the monitor lizard. So, whenever you do see a monitor lizard, just know that you're looking at something that, for all intents and purposes, walked with the dinosaurs. One interesting fact about these guys is that based on the order that these animals technically fall into, they are the largest identified lizard to have ever lived on Earth. Scientifically speaking, they fall under a different branch of animals' evolution than prehistoric reptiles like dinosaurs and therapsids, which, I've got to admit, is even news to me. So, there you have the 10 scariest animals you'll be glad are extinct.